Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something pretty fascinating. We are totally unpacking a highly specific, kind of controversial dating psychology framework that's been gaining a lot of traction lately in our source material. The text calls it the dark communication formula. Basically, it's a playbook for navigating conversations and building attraction. Now, we're going to look strictly at the mechanics of this thing. No judgment, just mapping out the claim step by step so you can see exactly how it's wired. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for The Explainer today. First up, the paradigm shift. Then, physical comfort. After that, we'll hit the 50-30-20 ratio, followed by the art of mystery, and finally, passing the social test. All right, let's kick things off with section 1, the paradigm shift, or what they call the subconscious radar. So before you even open your mouth, the source insists on a total mindset reset. You have to treat the other person as an absolute equal, take them completely off the pedestal. And this brings us to a huge recurring metaphor in the material, the subconscious radar. The framework argues that attraction isn't some logical math equation, right? It's an emotional current. The claim here is that women have this instinctual radar that totally bypasses logic. It's just feeling the frequency of your delivery to figure out if your confidence is actually genuine or if it's fake. Let's move to section 2 and see how this builds: physical comfort and posture. Now, this framework aggressively pushes back against all that traditional body language advice you've probably heard. You know, keeping your back perfectly straight, keeping your hands out of your pockets. Yeah, forget all that. That's framed here as just meaningless noise. Instead, the source gives us 3 distinct rules. Rule number 1, don't lean in when you're talking. Why? Because it signals you're a bit too eager and actually lowers your perceived value. Rule number 2, have the absolute courage to walk away if you face resistance. And rule 3, prioritize ultimate, unapologetic comfort over some rigid, forced posture. And this quote brilliantly illustrates that second rule about walking away. If the conversation hits a total wall or she clearly expresses disinterest, the source recommends this exact script. You just smile gently and say, "I know, I'm probably not your cup of tea. You're a very nice girl." And then you literally just walk away. The psychological claim here is pretty bold. It says that walking away without chasing approval demonstrates a high-value mindset. It proves you aren't dependent on the interaction, which supposedly pings that subconscious radar we talked about earlier in a really positive way. Moving right along to section 3. This is the mathematical core of it all, the 50-30-20 conversation ratio. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the exact conversational balance the source prescribes. It breaks every single interaction down into 3 distinct slices. 50% of the conversation should be focused on her, 30% on the environment or just completely random stuff, and only 20% should be about you. So let's look at exactly why the framework divides it up this way. Okay, so the largest slice of the pie, that 50%, is entirely about her. The framework suggests steering the conversation toward her personality, maybe her childhood and her future dreams. The source claims that when you just comfortably listen and allow someone to open up about their vulnerabilities, well, it creates what they call a hypnotic pull. It builds deep subconscious trust because you're giving them the floor. Then we have the next 30%, which is dedicated to the environment or just random banter. This is where the source advises you to be completely filter-free. Tell a silly joke, point out something totally absurd happening across the room. Just let it flow effortlessly. But, and this is a massive rule here, the key for this slice is absolutely no arguing. If there's a disagreement, you don't try to win the debate, you don't seek agreement. Why? Because the goal here is conversational freedom, not logical consensus. Finally, we hit the smallest slice, the 20% that's actually about you. The text draws a really fascinating parallel here to a job interview. Think about it. If you talk way too much about your own achievements, you start to sound like a candidate desperately trying to win over a hiring manager. Basically, over-explaining yourself signals a lot of power. So the advice? Keep it brief, definitely avoid bragging, and strategically use some self-deprecating humor to show that you are entirely secure in who you are. All right, section 4, the art of mystery. Let's see how this ties into that 20%. By keeping your own talking time strictly to that 20%, you naturally leave these little information gaps, which you can absolutely use to your advantage. The framework argues that giving straightforward, highly factual answers instantly kills conversational tension. For example, if you're asked where you work, a logical answer like, "I work at ABC Company from 9 to 5 just shuts down curiosity. But a playful deflection like, "Hold on, are you interviewing me right now?" keeps that subconscious radar heavily engaged. It literally forces the other person to wonder about you, rather than just filing away a boring fact. Here's another specific tactic the source throws out to maintain control: turning even your own name into a game. They suggest saying something like, guess my name first. If you get it right, I'll give you a candy. Now, the strategy here isn't to lie to them, but to remain slightly secretive and playful. By withholding really basic information in a fun way, you wrap the entire conversation around their curiosity. Now, all of this sounds like a totally smooth ride if the conversation is going your way, right? But our source poses a really important question here. What happens when your carefully constructed confidence is suddenly challenged? How does this whole framework hold up when the dynamic gets a little tricky? Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, passing the social test. According to the material, this social test is inevitable in pretty much any dynamic where attraction is at play. So the crucial point is understanding what it actually is. It's essentially a subconscious poke at your ego. It might come out as a tease, a slight mock, or a challenging question, but the framework heavily stresses that this is not a direct insult. It's an evaluation. That internal radar we mentioned is just checking to see if your relaxed 50-30-20 persona is genuine or if it's just a fragile act that's going to shatter the second you're under pressure. So, how do you handle it? Well, the source gives exact steps to pass this test. Step 1, absolutely zero emotional reaction. Getting angry or defensive, that's an instant fail. Step 2, maintain a calm smile. And step 3, do not justify yourself. You just let their words fall away into the air as if they literally hold no weight. By not reacting, you're supposedly proving that your confidence doesn't depend on their validation at all. And there we have it. We've mapped out the entire dark communication formula, from the subconscious radar and prioritizing physical comfort, right through that strict 50-30-20 ratio, the art of mystery, and finally, passing the social test. It is a highly structured, almost clinical approach to human interaction. But as we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with a rather provocative question to chew on. When you look at frameworks like this, are you actually communicating to build a genuine connection, or are you simply learning how to play a calculated game? Think about how these mechanics might unconsciously show up in your own conversations. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the frameworks around you.